As I continue this COVID journey, I ask important questions, and one of them is whether or not people are still actually dying. What you'll be told is that excess deaths have disappeared, we're back to normal, and everything moves on. And that's what you'd expect after the pandemic. The problem is that what happens if the data doesn't support this? Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you my analysis, what I have been looking at as I try and interpret what is going on now. As you may know, I have always predicted what I call a COVID storm. What that means is that once the immune system has been immune primed by vaccination, or in some people, if they're unvaccinated, by infection, but they get reinfected all the time, you then have what I call the storm, where you have a combination of immune dysregulation on reinfection. And based on that paradigm, I expect there to be a lot of problems. So that's where I'm coming from. And so all I can do is share with you my thoughts about where I think things are and where they're going. So let's start with what you are being told. So we're looking at the UK here, and this is the dashboard, deaths registered weekly in England and Wales. Now, the first thing to note is England and Wales, not the United Kingdom. And that's one of the things that caught me out and a lot of people out, is that because around early in the pandemic in 2021, they changed from using the whole UK to England and Wales. And that straight away adds some levels of confusion. But you will see here that the deaths registered and expected deaths for Friday, the 14th of November, 11,480, slightly higher than the previous week, but it is 4.5% lower than expected. And you can see here, the expected deaths is this black line. If you are below it, you are not having excess deaths. If you happen to go above it, then it suggests that you may have excess deaths occurring. And so based on this, looking through this data from 2023, 24, 2025, this looks great. Everything is okay. No need to be concerned. And you have to remember that in the UK, Andrew Bridgen, who was an MP, was challenging that narrative and saying that excess deaths needs to be investigated. And so, of course, what happened was that they just pulled this up and said, there are no excess deaths. There is no need to worry. You are just causing anxiety and fear. And this is what some people would say to me as well. But based on my scientific extrapolation, I cannot see how this is not going to be a problem with ongoing COVID virus circulation in highly immune primed populations. So, because I have this thought, I then look to see if there is evidence to support this kind of thinking. And so, what you have to understand, as I said, is that it got very confusing in about 2021 when, because of changing in reporting between Scotland and Northern Ireland, they had to break up their reporting as a whole UK and then do England and Wales, and Scotland was separate, Northern Ireland is separate, but you can still get the pieces and put them together. Okay? So this is what I then did. I got the pieces and I put them together. And I ended up with two charts, which are, one is accurate and the other one is largely an estimate for the UK. I haven't finished it yet, so you're seeing the raw data here that I've put in. And you can see here, this top line represents the UK. And starting about 600,000, I went from 2015 to see the trajectory over time. And it's largely stable with a very slight increase over the period of time of about 2,400 deaths per year based on the older population. And then you hit 2020 where there's a big surge. Then you see some coming down in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. And when I separated out the England and Wales, it follows a similar trajectory, okay? not exactly the same deviations, but about the same. So this number here is accurate for England and Wales from 2015 all the way to 2024. So that's the first thing. That is just raw numbers. How many people died? I'm not a statistician. I'm just simple. And so if a lot of people die, I'm curious to know, well, why are they dying? It's just simple questions, so to speak, why I look at this kind of thing. And additionally, I find that there is a degree of, how do I say this? If you are having excess deaths, you should know, and the population should know, and we should want to investigate this. In Australia, they knew and they chose at their parliament not to investigate it. In the UK, they said there was no excess death, so they didn't need to investigate it. I just cannot understand why, if we have public health and if we are interested in the health of the population, if something could be affecting the health of the population, why in the world would any government not want to investigate it? It literally makes no sense. So, in my simple mind, what I then did is I got the data for England and Wales from 2015 to 2024. I used a trend line to look at that period to see what would have been expected if we didn't have a pandemic. And here is what I came up with. I'll show you my chart that I used quite recently. Let me just get it here. And yes, so this is the point that I am saying, is that this is important information. It's what I call inconvenient science. What you can see here now is this is 2015 going along to 2019. And I've put a black line here to represent about the trend. It's not exact, but I just use it as a baseline. And what you would expect is that normally in 2020, 2021, they would hover around this baseline. What you can see here is a massive deviation in 2020. That makes perfect sense. That was when we had COVID. It comes down somewhat in 10 to 21. It levels off, it increases slightly 2022, and then it comes down in 2023 and 2024. But what you have to notice is that it is way above this trend, the baseline. So when you look at raw data from 2015 to 2019 without any of the statistical stuff, there are a lot more people dying post-pandemic. Now, as I said, I'm a simple soul. I don't necessarily understand all of the statistical toing and froing because they changed their whole statistical model in the UK. And this was why, just a reminder, this was why when you look at the current modeling, this is what it looks like. It doesn't show what I saw. In fact, less people are dying than expected. That's what is being seen in the current model. But when I do my modeling here, you can see that in fact, the actual numbers are significantly above the baseline. It has not come down to the baseline as yet. To me, as a simple soul, this looks as though more people are dying when we compare it to the previous trend of 2015 to 2019. As I said, I'm a simple soul. So I then did another exercise, and this is now where you get technology to help you to model some numbers, because you have to understand the principle of what we call mortality debt. As far as we know, you're only allowed to die once. Okay, you can't die twice. So if you have a cohort of people where more people die, what you expect after more people die is that less people die, because people who died once already can't die twice. And this is especially important for the elderly, the comorbid population who are more at risk, say, for instance, for severe COVID. We knew they had kidney disease, they had heart disease, they had hypertension, they had dementia. So a lot of them died in 2020 and into 2021. And so, what you expect if that you have intervened in the pandemic, you should then have what we call a mortality debt. So when I use that calculation to try and work out generally, again, these are just estimates, you will see what I'm trying to figure out in this image. And again, I'm not a statistician. I am just using simple, basic extrapolations to try and understand. And this is what it would look like. What you would expect is after the peak in 2020, it comes down somewhat in 2021. The pandemic is now sorted. The population has been intervened with. You then have a significant drop off in 2022. It would go below the trend of 2015 to 2019. It would then start to come up, and then it would drift towards the trend line again and start waving about it just like this, maybe even a little bit lower, because so many people had died at this point. And so this represents what you would call a mortality debt. They have died already, they can't die twice. So when you look at it that way, it then makes sense as to, and I'm going to show you again what that image looked like that I had worked on. When we look back after looking at the mortality debt, look again. This is what it is. Remember, we saw you should expect a significant fall below the trend and then coming up to the trend. So in reality, this is much higher than the mortality debt because it would be lower than the trend line. So it actually is far higher, this excess deaths, even up into 2024. So my first argument is simple. Excess deaths are real. They're not your imagination. It's not because you've been listening to strange people. The numbers indicate that even up till 2024, the trend line indicates it's above what had happened in 2015 to 2019. Some people may say that because of COVID, so even though someone survived COVID, they have more organ damage and so they could die earlier. I accept that. And so you would think that some proportion of the population would be at risk. But when we look at real numbers in terms of severe disease, it was a fraction of the population. What else is left? I'm trying to think now. I don't know. Is there anything else that could be a contributing factor? Maybe there are a few other things that could happen that could cause it. I mean, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what else could be a contributing factor to this. But we can speculate. I don't know, maybe something happened, alien intervention, anything. But it can't be what you are thinking of. So whatever you are thinking there, it can't be that. That's the important thing. So here's the final point that I will make. And I'm going to use this image that I use all the time with regards to what I think is happening. I've explained that there are a number of camps. Some people believe that everything that we see bad happening now is just related to the vaccine. Another camp believes that everything we see happening is just related to infection. I'm in the third cohort. I think that it's a combination of the two. And this is what I said is that COVID storm, spike triggered autoimmune response mechanism. In a situation where you have on the right COVID vaccination with immune priming, and then you have recurring COVID infection, it becomes like what I think happens is the epoxy glue. On their own, they don't really stick. But if you put them together, you then have an absolutely frightening situation. This is why I expect excess deaths to remain above that trend. I don't expect them to come down. That's my expectation based on that extrapolation of the science. And so what we then have to prepare for is if it doesn't come down, who is at risk? Is there any way that we can mitigate these risks? Those are the questions that we should be trying to answer. But as I said, there is no opportunity to mitigate if there is no acknowledgement that there is a problem. At the moment, we're going in circles, and the only people who are going to suffer are the people who are just going along with everything else. Final point I'll make is that when it comes to, let me get rid of this. When it comes to reading more about this, I've done a Substack on persistent excess deaths where I give some explanations about it. For those people who have any issues with regards to comments, you are free to make comments there. You can say what you like, and I won't take it down. And more importantly, you can see some interesting points. These are some of the points already that somebody highlighted. Somebody's talking about fertility collapse. I'm going to look at that. I think that's very, very interesting. Somebody here is talking about Northern Ireland figures. We all know why the reporting stopped, because being sent out to the public to see reporting has not stopped, just stopped for citizens to see. So the comments are interesting, and I really appreciate those people who continue to join in this journey of exploring that science. So if you're interested in looking at the full article, look in the description below and you'll see the link. You can join on Substack and support us in any way that you want. So thank you all very much. And don't forget to hum, because that's the thing that will keep us all safe coming into this winter period if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, not as serious in the Southern Hemisphere at the moment. Have a great evening.
A hero, an immune adventure. Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.